I showed my lonely roommate Pretty Little Liars, so she'd have something to bond over with other girls in our dorm. She started installing hidden cameras everywhere and collecting hair samples from everyone on our floor because she believed someone was targeting her as A. When I tried to get her help, she showed me screenshots of my dad's immigration status and said she'd call ICE unless I helped her drug our literature TA, who she was convinced was the real A. For as long as I could remember, Lucia had been the loneliest person in our dorm. She'd eat alone in the cafeteria and spent Friday nights doing homework while everyone else partied. Someone posted on TikTok calling her the weird, friendless girl in Hayes Hall, and I found her sobbing on her bed. I felt terrible for her. That's when I showed her Pretty Little Liars. We were having a movie night and I picked the pilot episode. Lucia's whole face changed when she saw those 4 girls. They protect each other no matter what, she whispered. We watched it together every night after that. She'd always say, "Thanks for being my Spencer," which made me happy. I just wanted her to have a friend. At first, Lucia's PLL obsession seemed like typical fan behavior. She binged all 7 seasons while I was in class and decorated our room with vintage cameras and black feathers. She started hosting viewing parties and made friendship bracelets that spelled LIARS for everyone on our floor. She even created this theory blog that got thousands of followers. Her confidence grew too. She wore red lipstick like Arya and actually raised her hand in class. We'd joke around saying, 2 can keep a secret if one of them is dead. I was proud of her transformation. Things got weird after she received an anonymous Canvas message. It said, "Stop trying so hard, A." And I laughed because someone was obviously pranking her. But Lucia went cold. "How'd you know it was signed A?" I never said that. The way she looked at me made my skin crawl, like I was suddenly a suspect instead of her friend. She started taking ice baths at 3 a.m. to sharpen her detective instincts like Spencer. She only ate foods from the show, which meant nothing but coffee and pastries. I found 6 cameras hidden in our room, 1 in the smoke detector that blinked red at night, 1 behind the mirror where I did my makeup, even 1 sewn into her teddy bear that watched me sleep. When I confronted her, she said she needed to catch A watching her. The way she said it so matter-of-factly terrified me more than the cameras did. Then came the hair collecting. She had labeled baggies with hair samples from everyone on our floor lined up on her desk like evidence. She wore different colored contacts each day to match different liars, which made her look possessed. People started crossing to the other side of the hallway when they saw her coming. But what really scared me was when I caught her carving an A into her thigh with a compass. Blood dripped onto our carpet while she worked. "I need to understand the victims," she said, like it was completely normal. Like I was weird for being horrified. I started staying in my friend's room after that, and Lucia's paranoia escalated fast. She hacked into people's Instagram accounts looking for evidence. She followed our professors home and mapped their entire routines. When she made everyone take polygraph tests she bought online, I tried calling her parents. She smashed my phone with a hammer. "You're working with A!" she screamed. I woke up the next morning to find she'd superglued my door shut. I wanted to report her, but I guess when your parents are illegal citizens, you grow up learning not to trust authorities. I sort of just hoped the problem would go A by itself. I was eating ramen one day when Lucia came in trying to convince me that our literature TA was A. His initials were AT, which meant a team, according to her. Plus, he used red pens just like in the show. When I suggested she needed professional help, she attacked me with scissors. "Spencer would never betray Emily!" she screamed while trying to stab me. The RA's cat disappeared the next day. Lucia had taken him because A always uses innocent creatures as proxies. When I threatened to report her, she showed me screenshots on her phone, text messages between me and my dad about his immigration status, things I'd never told anyone. "Your dad doesn't have papers," she said calmly. "Help me or ICE gets an anonymous tip." I had no idea how she got a hold of them, but either way, I was trapped. When she asked me to help plan her confrontation with the TA, I said yes. And when she asked me to help her set up tripwires in the parking garage and make some kind of sedative from stuff she bought online, I said yes. She'd lured him there with a fake email about a student in crisis. The sound his head made when he hit the concrete still haunts me. The wire caught his ankle perfectly. Lucia jumped on him with the syringe before he could even process what happened. "Tell me who else is working with you," she screamed while injecting him. His body started shaking violently. Foam poured from his mouth. That's when I ran. I sprinted through the parking garage, my sneakers slapping against concrete. Behind me, Lucia's voice echoed off the walls. She was still screaming at the TA's unconscious body about secret codes and hidden messages. My hands shook as I fumbled with my car keys. The metal kept slipping through my sweaty fingers. The TA's body had stopped moving completely. That image burned into my brain as I finally got my car door open. I needed to call 911, but Lucia still had those screenshots. 1 anonymous tip to ICE and my dad would be deported. 20 years of building a life here, gone because I trusted the wrong person with our family secret. I drove straight to the hospital emergency entrance and ran inside. The fluorescent lights made everything look harsh and unreal. I told the woman at the desk about a man collapsed in the university parking garage, possibly overdosed on something. She immediately called for paramedics while I gave the location. When she asked for my name, I mumbled something fake and left before she could ask more questions. Back in my car, I sat there shaking. The TA might die because of me, because I'd helped Lucia set those wires, because I'd watched her fill that syringe with whatever cocktail she'd made from internet recipes. My phone buzzed with texts from Lucia, pictures of my dad at his construction job, screenshots of our family group chat, a simple message underneath, "Where are you?" I couldn't go back to the dorm, couldn't go home either since Lucia knew where my parents lived. Instead, I drove to a 24-hour diner and sat in the back booth, trying to think. The waitress kept refilling my coffee while I stared at my phone. Lucia's messages got increasingly frantic. She'd left the parking garage and was looking for me. She knew I'd betrayed her by calling for help. Around 3 a.m., she sent a video. My stomach dropped when I saw my little sister's bedroom through her window. The camera zoomed in on her sleeping face, then panned to show Lucia's reflection in the glass. "Found your family's house. Such a pretty neighborhood. Would be a shame if ICE raided it tomorrow morning." The threat was clear. Come back or she'd destroy my family. I drove back to campus as the sun came up. Hayes This hall looked normal from the outside, but I knew what waited inside. Lucia sat on my bed, still wearing the same clothes from last night. Dark stains covered her shirt. The TA's blood, I realized. She'd arranged evidence on my desk like some kind of shrine. Hair samples, printed emails, surveillance photos of the TA. She smiled when she saw me. Not her normal smile, but something twisted. You called them. You tried to save him. Her voice stayed eerily calm. That makes you complicit with A, but I'm willing to forgive you if you help me finish this. I asked what she meant by finish. She pulled out a notebook filled with names, all crossed out except 3. RRA, the girl who'd posted that TikTok about her, and me. These are A's remaining accomplices. We need to interrogate them properly. The way she said interrogate made my blood run cold. She'd already started with the RA. While I was gone, she'd broken into his room and found evidence. A red pen in his desk drawer. A hoodie with the letter A on it from his high school. Normal things that meant nothing, but in Lucia's mind proved everything. She'd taken photos of him sleeping and drawn red circles around imaginary clues. I tried reasoning with her. Told her the TA was just a grad student trying to make rent, not some criminal mastermind. But she grabbed my wrist hard enough to leave marks. You're either with me or against me. And if you're against me, your dad goes back to Mexico tomorrow. The casual cruelty in her voice terrified me more than her screaming ever had. She made me sit there while she planned her next move. The RA had a routine. Coffee at 7 a.m., class at 8, lunch at the student center. She'd mapped it all out with timestamps and photos. We'll confront him after his evening jog. The running trail is isolated enough. The word isolated made me sick. I couldn't let her hurt anyone else. While she rambled about surveillance tactics, I noticed something. Her phone sat unlocked on the bed, those screenshots still open. If I could delete them somehow, maybe I'd have leverage. But Lucia watched me constantly, even following me to the bathroom. She'd become my shadow, paranoid that I'd betray her again. The news about the TA spread across campus by afternoon. He was in critical condition, some kind of toxic reaction to an unknown substance. Police were investigating it as a possible substance OD. Lucia seemed pleased by this. See? They don't suspect anything. A is probably panicking now, knowing we're onto them. She dragged me to the library to research truth serums on the computers there. I sat next to her, watching her scroll through dangerous websites filled with homemade chemical formulas. Students around us typed away on their essays, completely unaware of what she was planning. I kept glancing at the exit, calculating how fast I could run if I needed to. But Lucia's hand stayed firmly on my arm, her nails digging in whenever I shifted in my seat. She printed out pages of instructions for something called a compliance cocktail that supposedly made people more suggestible. I wonder why the narrator kept helping Lucia even before the blackmail started. She saw those cameras everywhere, watched her carve an A into her own skin, but still stuck around to help with tripwires and sedatives. The ingredients list included common household items mixed in specific ratios. My stomach churned as she highlighted the important parts with a yellow marker. The same kind of mixture she'd used on the TA was now being refined for her next victim. Campus security walked past our table and I tensed up. Part of me wanted to signal them somehow, but Lucia's grip tightened. She leaned close and reminded me about the photos of my sister's bedroom. The security guard continued his rounds, oblivious to the danger sitting right in front of him. Back in our room, Lucia started mixing chemicals in plastic bottles she'd stolen from the chemistry lab. The smell made my eyes water. She worked methodically, measuring each ingredient with the precision of someone who'd done this before. I realized with growing horror that the TA probably wasn't her first test subject. There might have been others I didn't know about. She forced me to help her prepare syringes, threatening to make the call to ice if I refused. My hands trembled as I held the bottles while she drew up the clear liquid. Each syringe got labeled with a different dosage. She was experimenting, trying to find the perfect amount that would incapacitate without culling. The TA had been given too much. She wouldn't make that mistake again. The RA returned from his evening jog right on schedule. Lucia watched from our window as he stretched by the dorm entrance. She'd been tracking his movements for weeks, noting that he always used the water fountain on the 3rd floor after his runs. That's where she planned to corner him. She handed me one of the syringes and told me to hide it in my pocket. I tried to refuse, but she pulled out her phone and started dialing a number. The area code was for the ICE tip line. I took the syringe. We waited in the stairwell near the water fountain. My heart pounded so loud I was sure everyone could hear it. Lucia stayed perfectly still, like a predator waiting to strike. The RA's footsteps echoed up the stairs. He was humming some pop song, completely unaware of what was about to happen. He bent down to drink from the fountain. Lucia moved fast, grabbing him from behind, but the RA was stronger than the TA had been. He spun around and shoved her hard against the wall. The syringe flew from her hand and skittered across the floor. I stood frozen as they struggled. The RA was yelling for help now. Lucia screamed at me to use my syringe, but I couldn't move. Students started opening their doors to see what was happening. Someone called campus security. Lucia managed to grab the fallen syringe and lunged at the RA again. He caught her wrist and they wrestled for control. The needle ended up jabbing into Lucia's own leg. She gasped and stumbled backward, eyes going wide as the chemicals hit her system. The RA backed away, confused and terrified. Other students crowded around us. Someone was filming with their phone. Lucia tried to speak, but her words came out slurred. The cocktail was working exactly as she'd designed it to. Campus security arrived within minutes. They found Lucia barely conscious on the floor, the syringe still sticking out of her thigh. The RA explained what happened while I stood there in shock. When security asked me what I knew, I couldn't form words. One of them noticed the syringe in my pocket. They took us both to the campus police station. Lucia was rushed to the hospital first, mumbling incoherently about codes and messages. I sat in a small room while officers asked questions I couldn't answer. How could I explain any of this without mentioning the blackmail? Without putting my father at risk? I told them Lucia had been acting strange lately, that she'd become obsessed with a TV show and started seeing conspiracies everywhere. I didn't mention helping her with the TA, didn't mention the tripwires or the mixing of chemicals, just kept insisting I had no idea what she was planning with the RA. They kept me there for hours. Eventually, they let me call my roommate from freshman year, who came to pick me up. The whole campus was buzzing with rumors. Someone had posted the video of Lucia attacking the RA. It already had thousands of views. I stayed in my friend's room that night, unable to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the TA convulsing on the parking garage floor, saw Lucia's face as her own poison worked through her system. My phone had been confiscated by campus police, but I knew she still had those screenshots saved somewhere. The next morning brought more bad news. The TA had slipped into a coma. Doctors weren't sure if he'd wake up. Lucia was stable, but experiencing severe neurological effects from the injection. She couldn't form coherent sentences and kept drawing the letter A over and over on anything they gave her. I was called back to the police station. This time they had more questions. They'd found the chemistry lab supplies in our room, found her notebooks full of surveillance photos and plans, found the hidden cameras she'd installed. The evidence was overwhelming. They also found her laptop, password protected, but they were working on cracking it. I felt sick knowing those screenshots of my father were on there. Once they accessed her files, they'd see everything, including evidence that I'd known about her plans. I asked for a lawyer but didn't know how to pay for one. My parents couldn't know about any of this. They'd worked too hard to build their life here. I couldn't be the reason it all fell apart. Days passed in a blur. I moved my stuff out of Hayes Hall and into temporary housing. Everywhere I went on campus, people whispered and stared. I was the girl who'd roomed with the Pretty Little Liars psycho. That's what the news was calling her now. The story had gone beyond campus, picked up by local media who loved the sensational angle. The girl who'd posted the original TikTok about Lucia reached out to me. She felt guilty, wondering if her video had triggered all of this. I told her it wasn't her fault, but I could see she didn't believe me. None of us could have predicted how far Lucia would go. I tried to visit Lucia in the hospital, but they wouldn't let me see her. Her parents had flown in from out of state. I saw them in the lobby once, looking destroyed. They kept asking how they'd missed the signs, how their daughter had become so lost in a fantasy world. The police finally cracked her laptop. A detective called me in to discuss what they'd found. My heart raced as I sat across from him, waiting for him to mention the screenshots. Instead, he showed me hundreds of files about her investigation, photos of every student in Hayes Hall, detailed profiles she'd created, marking potential suspects, plans for confrontations that thankfully never happened. He asked if I recognized any of the surveillance photos. Most were taken without people's knowledge. The RA sleeping, the TA at his office hours, me brushing my teeth in the communal bathroom. The level of obsession was staggering. Then he pulled up a folder labeled insurance. My blood went cold. Inside were the screenshots about my father, but also similar dirt on other students. Grade screenshots showing academic probation, photos of underage drinking, evidence of a girl's eating disorder. Lucia had been collecting secrets on everyone, building an arsenal of blackmail material. The detective asked if she'd ever threatened me. I hesitated, then nodded. He pushed a form across the table. If I was willing to testify about the blackmail, it would help their case. But testifying meant everything would become public record, including what she'd held over me. I asked for time to think. He gave me his card and said to call when I was ready. Walking out of that station, I felt the weight of the decision crushing me. Protect my father, or help stop Lucia from hurting anyone else when she got out. The TA's condition hadn't improved. His family had started a fundraising page for medical expenses. I donated what little money I had, knowing it would never be enough. Knowing I was partially responsible for him being there, I started seeing a campus counselor, told her about the guilt eating me alive. She helped me understand that Lucia had manipulated me, that victims of blackmail often feel complicit in crimes they're forced to participate in. It helped, but only a little. My grades suffered. I couldn't focus in class, kept seeing Lucia's face everywhere. The counselor suggested I might have PTSD from everything that happened. She recommended I take a medical leave from school, but I couldn't afford to lose my scholarships. Then Lucia started showing improvement. The neurological effects were wearing off. She was forming sentences again, though they didn't always make sense. Her parents hired a high-profile lawyer who started building an insanity defense. The news coverage intensified. I got a call from an unknown number. It was Lucia's mother. She begged me to visit her daughter, said Lucia kept asking for me. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The psychiatric ward was nothing like on TV. It was quiet, sterile, with locked doors and tired-looking staff. Lucia sat in a common area, drawing in a notebook. She looked up when I entered and smiled. Not the twisted smile from before, but something sadder. She apologized, said the chemicals had cleared her head, made her realize how far she'd fallen into delusion. She knew the show wasn't real now, knew there was no conspiracy, but she remembered everything she'd done, every person she'd hurt. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to forgive her, remembering the lonely girl who just wanted friends, but I couldn't forget the TA in his coma, couldn't forget the terror I'd felt living under her threats. She asked about her laptop, wanted to know if the police had found her files. When I nodded, her face crumpled. She knew what was on there, knew how many people she'd violated by collecting their secrets. The way Lucia's brain switched from completely believing her conspiracy to suddenly seeing reality after the injection is really intriguing. What exactly did those chemicals do to change her thinking so dramatically? Her lawyer arrived and ended our conversation. He pulled me aside afterward, asking what Lucia had said, warning me that anything could be used in court. I realized then that even her apology might have been calculated, performed for legal benefit. The RA transferred to another school. He couldn't handle being on campus anymore, jumping at every sound. The girl from the TikTok deleted all her social media. Other students from Hayes Hall formed a support group, trying to process the trauma of living near someone so dangerous. I joined the group reluctantly. Hearing their stories helped me realize I wasn't alone. Several others had noticed Lucia's strange behavior but hadn't known what to do. We'd all failed to act, and now we shared the guilt. The detective called again. The prosecutor needed my testimony to establish a pattern of escalation. Without it, Lucia might get a lighter sentence, might be back on the streets in just a few years. The thought terrified me. I finally told my parents everything, sat them down and explained why I'd been so distant, why my grades were suffering. My father went very quiet when I mentioned the blackmail. My mother cried. They didn't blame me, but I could see the fear in their eyes, the fear that their status would be exposed in court. My father made the decision for me, said we couldn't live in fear anymore. If testifying meant risking exposure, future, we'd face it together. He'd rather deal with immigration authorities than let someone like Lucia hurt more people. I called the detective and agreed to testify. He walked me through what would happen, the questions they'd ask, the evidence they'd present. It would be brutal, reliving everything in front of a jury, but it was necessary. Lucia's lawyer tried to get the blackmail evidence thrown out, argued it was obtained through illegal surveillance, but the judge ruled it admissible, saying it established motive and pattern of behavior. The trial date was set. I spent weeks preparing with the prosecutor, going over every detail. They showed me photos from the crime scenes, the parking garage where the TA fell, the stairwell where Lucia injected herself, evidence of the chemicals she'd mixed. It was overwhelming. Other students agreed to testify too. The RA would describe the attack. The girl from the TikTok would explain how Lucia had stalked her afterward. Together, we'd paint a picture of someone who'd lost touch with reality and hurt anyone who got in her way. But Lucia's defense team was building their own case. They'd found experts to testify about obsessive disorders, about how isolation and bullying could drive someone to break from reality. They were painting her as a victim too. I understood their strategy but couldn't accept it. Yes, Lucia had been lonely. Yes, she'd been mocked online. But lots of people face those challenges without poisoning anyone, without terrorizing an entire dorm. The TA finally woke up 2 weeks before the trial. He had significant memory loss and motor function problems, would need months of rehabilitation. His testimony would be limited, but his presence would be powerful. I visited him once, apologized for my role in what happened. He didn't remember me, didn't remember that night. In some ways, that was worse. He'd lost months of his life because of us, and he didn't even know why. Lucia's parents tried one last time to convince me not to testify, offered to pay for my father's immigration lawyer if I stayed quiet. The offer was tempting, but I couldn't take it. Couldn't let them buy my silence after everything that happened. The media attention grew as the trial approached. Reporters called constantly, wanting exclusive interviews. Someone leaked that blackmail was involved, though they didn't have specifics. My family started getting questions about our background. I moved back home temporarily, unable to handle being on campus. Every corner held memories of that night. Every siren made me think of ambulances. The trauma was inescapable. My counselor increased our sessions, taught me coping techniques for the anxiety, breathing exercises for when the panic attacks hit. I'd need them all during testimony. The prosecutor warned me that Lucia would be in the courtroom, that I'd have to face her while describing what she'd done. The thought made me physically sick, but I was committed now. Had to see it through. Other witnesses started backing out as the pressure mounted. The girl from the TikTok decided she couldn't handle testifying. Another student who'd been blackmailed chose to protect their secret rather than speak up. Our case was weakening, but then something unexpected happened. A student I didn't know came forward. Lucia had apparently targeted him months earlier, before focusing on the TA. He'd received threatening messages, been followed home, had his personal information exposed online. He'd been too scared to report it then, but was ready to speak up now. His testimony would establish that this wasn't Lucia's first victim, that the pattern had been escalating for longer than we'd known. It was exactly what the prosecution needed. I spent the night before my testimony at home, surrounded by family. They prayed for strength, for justice, for protection. I didn't sleep, just stared at the ceiling, replaying everything that would happen the next day. The courthouse was packed with media when we arrived. Cameras flashed as we pushed through the crowd. My father held my hand tight, reminding me why I was doing this. Inside, the prosecutor met us and went over last-minute details. Then I saw her. Lucia sat at the defense table in a conservative dress, looking nothing like the girl who'd terrorized our dorm. She'd lost weight, her hair neatly styled, playing the part of the reformed patient. Our eyes met briefly. I expected to see hatred or anger. Instead, there was something else. Resignation, maybe, or recognition of what she'd become. It lasted only a moment before her lawyer whispered something and she looked away. The judge called the court to order. Opening statements began. The prosecution painted Lucia as a dangerous individual who'd systematically hunted victims. The defense countered that she was mentally ill, driven to break by circumstances beyond her control. When they called me to the stand, my legs felt like jelly. The walk seemed endless. Taking the oath, I thought about all the people counting on me. The TA still in rehabilitation. The RA who'd fled school. Everyone who'd lived in fear because of her. The prosecutor started with easy questions. My name, how I knew Lucia, how long we'd roomed together, building to the harder parts. When she asked about the night I showed Lucia the TV show, my voice cracked. Such an innocent decision that had led to so much pain. I described the escalation, the cameras hidden in our room, the hair collection, the self-harm. Each detail felt like reliving the nightmare. The jury listened intently, some taking notes, others looking horrified. Then came the hardest part, the blackmail. I had to explain about my father's status, how Lucia had obtained the information, how she'd used it to control me. My parents sat in the gallery, heads high despite the shame of exposure. Their courage gave me strength. I detailed helping with the TA attack, the tripwires, the chemical mixing, the assault in the parking garage, how I'd run when he started convulsing, how I'd called for help but been too scared to give my name. The guilt poured out with every word. The defense attorney's cross-examination was brutal. He questioned why I hadn't reported Lucia earlier, why I'd continued living with her even after finding the cameras. He implied I was equally responsible for the TA's condition, but I held firm, explained the impossible position Lucia had put me in, the fear for my family, the gradual escalation that had trapped me. The jury seemed to understand, nodding as I spoke. When I finally stepped down, I was exhausted but relieved. The truth was out. Whatever happened next, I'd done my part. The weight that had been crushing me for months lifted slightly. Other witnesses followed. The RA described his attack in vivid detail. The new witness revealed Lucia's earlier stalking. The TA, speaking slowly due to his injuries, told what little he remembered. Each testimony built the case stronger. Lucia's defense team tried to counter with their own witnesses, psychiatrists who diagnosed her with various disorders, character witnesses who described the bullying she'd faced. They painted a sympathetic picture, but it felt hollow against the reality of her victims. When Lucia herself took the stand, the courtroom went silent. She spoke softly about her obsession with the show, how the line between fantasy and reality had blurred, how she truly believed there was a conspiracy against her. She apologized to each victim by name, claimed the chemical injection had shocked her back to sanity, begged for understanding and treatment rather than punishment. It was a powerful performance, and I could see some jurors wavering, but the prosecution's closing argument brought focus back to the victims, the TA who might never fully recover, the students who'd lived in terror, the systematic way Lucia had gathered blackmail material on innocent people. Mental illness might explain her actions, but it didn't excuse them. The jury deliberated for 2 days. We waited in agony, wondering if we'd done enough, if justice would prevail, or if Lucia would manipulate her way to freedom once again. When they returned with a verdict, I held my breath. Guilty on all counts: assault, blackmail, stalking, harassment. The judge would determine sentencing, but Lucia was going to prison. It was over. Lucia showed no emotion as the verdict was read. Her parents wept quietly. I felt no satisfaction, just emptiness. Lives had been destroyed. Nothing could undo that damage. At sentencing, the judge gave her 15 years with possibility of parole in 7. Lucia's sudden switch to playing the perfect reformed patient in court seems really convenient, doesn't it? All that careful styling and weight loss. I wonder if her lawyer coached her on exactly how to look sympathetic to the jury right now. Mandatory psychiatric treatment throughout. It seemed fair, balancing punishment with the recognition of her mental state. Walking out of the courthouse for the last time, I felt different. Lighter, but also heavier. The truth had set me free from the secret, but I'd carry the scars forever. My father squeezed my shoulder, proud of my courage. The media attention eventually died down. Life slowly returned to something resembling normal. I changed majors, unable to face literature classes anymore. Started fresh with new goals, new dreams. The TA recovered more than doctors expected. He returned to teaching the next year, though he never held evening office hours again. The RA found peace at his new school. We all moved forward, forever changed but not broken. I never watched Pretty Little Liars again. Couldn't even see advertisements for it without feeling sick. That innocent show had become twisted into something monstrous in Lucia's mind, a reminder of how fragile sanity could be. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I'd never shown her that first episode, if I'd just let her remain lonely instead of trying to help. But my counselor reminded me that Lucia's break from reality wasn't my fault. The seeds of her obsession had been planted long before that night. The weeks after sentencing brought unexpected challenges. Lucia's lawyer filed an appeal, claiming ineffective counsel and procedural errors. The prosecutor warned me this was standard practice, but it meant the nightmare wasn't truly over. I might have to testify again if the appeal gained traction. My father met with an immigration attorney the prosecutor recommended. The lawyer reviewed our case and explained that my testimony under oath about our status created complications. While no immediate action was taken, we now existed in a legal gray area. The attorney started preparing documentation for a potential asylum claim based on the threats we'd faced. Campus life became increasingly difficult. Some students treated me like a hero for standing up to Lucia. Others whispered that I'd betrayed a mentally ill girl who needed help, not prison. The divide made attending classes uncomfortable. Professors knew my story from the media coverage and either gave me too much sympathy or treated me with suspicion. I discovered Lucia had maintained a journal in her cell. Her lawyer subpoenaed me for a deposition about entries where she'd written about our friendship before the obsession took hold. They wanted to establish that I'd encouraged her fixation on the show, making me partially responsible for her breakdown. The prosecutor coached me through responses, but the experience left me shaken. My sister started having nightmares about strangers at her window. The video Lucia had sent of her sleeping had traumatized her more than we'd initially realized. My parents hired a child therapist and installed new security systems, expenses they could barely afford. The ripple effects of Lucia's actions continued spreading through my family. The prosecutor said I could submit a victim impact statement opposing the reduction, but doing so would put me back in the spotlight, potentially triggering more harassment from her supporters. My counselor helped me weigh the decision. We discussed how trauma responses affected decision-making, and the importance of focusing on what I could control. After several sessions, I decided to submit the statement. I couldn't let fear silence me again. Writing the statement took weeks. I detailed the ongoing impact of Lucia's actions on my family, the therapy bills, the security costs, my sister's nightmares, my father's job loss. I explained how her supporters continued her campaign of intimidation, how I'd changed majors and lived in constant fear despite her incarceration. The hearing for sentence reduction was scheduled for winter break. I attended with my parents, sitting in the gallery as Lucia's lawyer argued she'd been rehabilitated. Lucia appeared via video link from prison, looking healthier than I'd seen her in years. She spoke clearly about her remorse and understanding of her actions. When my statement was read aloud, Lucia's expression never changed. She maintained eye contact with the camera, nodding occasionally as if accepting responsibility, but something in her eyes reminded me of the calculated performance during her trial testimony. The judge took the matter under advisement. Weeks passed before the decision came down. Sentence reduction denied. Lucia would serve at least 7 years before parole eligibility. The relief I felt was tempered by exhaustion. This victory had cost so much. Spring semester brought a measure of peace. The harassment decreased, though it never fully stopped. I found a new rhythm, attending classes and counseling while helping my family navigate their challenges. My father eventually found work with a company that didn't ask too many questions. The TA's civil suit was settled out of court. Insurance covered most of it, though I had to agree to a payment plan for my portion. It would take years to pay off, but at least the legal battles were ending. He sent a letter through his lawyer saying he didn't blame me, understanding I'd been a victim too. I started volunteering with a campus organization that educated students about stalking and manipulation. Sharing my story in small groups helped process the trauma while potentially protecting others. Several students approached me afterward, recognizing similar patterns in their own relationships. My sister slowly improved with therapy. The nightmares became less frequent. She stopped checking windows obsessively. Children's resilience amazed me, though I knew the experience had changed her permanently. We all carried invisible scars from Lucia's obsession. A year after the trial, I received noticed that Lucia had been transferred to a minimum security facility due to good behavior. The news unsettled me, but the prosecutor assured me this was standard. She remained locked up, just in a different environment. Still, I increased my vigilance again. I managed to complete my degree, though it took an extra semester. The new major in social work felt more meaningful after everything I'd experienced. My grades recovered enough to graduate with decent standing. Not the stellar transcript I'd once planned, but an achievement nonetheless. At graduation, my family sat in the audience beaming with pride. We'd survived Lucia's attempts to destroy us. My father's immigration case remained unresolved but stable. My sister had returned to being a normal kid mostly. We'd found a new version of normal. The ceremony felt surreal. 3 years had passed since that night I'd shown Lucia the pilot episode. So much had changed. I'd lost my innocence about friendship and trust, but gained understanding about resilience and justice. The diploma represented more than academic achievement. After the ceremony, I cleaned out my final dorm room. Behind the dresser, I found a friendship bracelet spelling LIARS, one of the ones Lucia had made during her viewing parties. I held it for a moment, remembering the girl who'd just wanted friends. Then I threw it in the trash where it belonged. I accepted a job at a domestic violence shelter in a city 2 hours away, far enough to feel like a fresh start but close enough to help my family. The work felt meaningful, helping others escape manipulation and abuse. My experience, painful as it was, could serve a purpose. Before leaving town, I drove past Hayes Hall one last time. New students lived there now, unaware of what had happened within those walls. The building looked exactly the same, but I saw ghosts in every window. I didn't stop, just continued driving toward my new life. Thanks for letting me wonder through all of this with you. It's definitely been something to share these thoughts together. Until we meet again, subscribe for more content like this.